This week, members of Congress have been briefed by H-2B workers from India about horrendous work abuses that they have suffered in Texas and Mississippi at the hands of the Signal International Corporation. They were promised green cards and family visas, and over 600, close to 600 workers spent and gathered $20,000 US, their life savings, only to be provided with H-2B visas, temporary visas, wage and hour violations, inadequate facilities, cramped living quarters, isolation, constant surveillance by armed guards, and threats of deportation for those who reported these abuses. I'm aware that the workers have reported these abuses to the Department of Justice. Could you confirm that DOJ is conducting a serious investigation into this case? And I hope that DOJ is the lead on the investigation on these cases, if they are, and not Immigration Customs Enforcement. And how will DOJ ensure that these H-2B workers will be able to fully participate in the investigation, given their current vulnerabilities? Another section of my question in this area is, I'm concerned about whether the DOJ is generally putting effort into investigating these types of labor trafficking cases, and how many past investigations have been conducted involving labor abuses of guest workers by U.S. corporations and recruiters, and how many of these cases have been prosecuted, or were the results? The current temporary worker program in the United States permits serious abuses to occur. What is the protocol for investigating cases that involve guest workers given their particular situation and vulnerabilities? And later I have another question on Korean immigrants.
I have heard about, but I'm not familiar with the point of being able to discuss it. The particular case that you mentioned, and I'd like to get back to you further on that. Although from the facts you describe, it sounds like a fraud investigation might conceivably be warranted. But I would like to know more about it, and we'll respond in writing about that. The department responds to the situation of workers who are brought here and kept essentially in slavery. I mean, when I was district judge, I prosecuted a woman who headed what was called a snakehead operation and kept people in virtual slavery. She's doing a substantial sentence as a result of that. And people who work with her are doing substantial sentences as a result of that. So that's not something that escapes notice. But the particular case you mentioned is something that came to my attention the other day. I have not gotten into the details of it, and I shouldn't respond without knowing that.
We'll look forward.
Same is true for the numbers that you asked for.
Right. We'll look forward to working with you very closely because of the seriousness of the case and its implications. My second question, Mr. Attorney General, is over a 12-year period, a longtime INS supervisor accepted over $500,000 in bribes from immigration consultants in exchange for green cards he later authorized. In 1999, before immigration consultants were convicted for their participation in this green card scam that affected some 275 Korean immigrants. Based on the testimony of the corrupt INS officer who paid a fine and only received probation. As a result of this fraudulent scheme conducted by this INS official and immigration consultants, hundreds of these Korean immigrants are facing uncertainty for almost 8 years now. They're facing deportation hearings and undue anxiety after building their lives in California for the past 2 decades. And I'm sure that the department comes across cases of immigration fraud such as this, where innocent victims may be subject to deportation proceedings. How does the department handle these cases to ensure that the innocent victims are not punished for wrongdoings of corrupt officials and middlemen? Is there collaboration with the Department of Homeland Security to ensure that the lives of innocent victims are not destroyed and families not separated?
The way cases are built has to vary on a case-by-case basis, and as you point out in your question, the responsibility for what happens to people who are here and are undocumented is principally that of DHS rather than DOJ. said, we try to prosecute people who are principally responsible for schemes like the one that you mentioned. Again, calling on my experience as a district judge, I tried somebody who was a guard over 26 Federal Plaza who was conning people into believing he had authority. He too was serving time in jail.
Let me just interrupt. I don't want to be disrespectful. I just want to make use of my time. The point is that this case was shifted over to DHS because of the shifting of responsibilities. My question is, if we are pursuing justice, and in your preamble, you talked about ensuring justice, and even though it goes over to DHS, when these cases are prosecuted and we go after and punish the perpetrators, why would the victims be victimized again when they're up for review of their green cards? And why could we not argue on their behalf and say, let's put them in another situation and treat them as if none of these things had happened, so that they can be dealt with in a way that there were no other situation that was negative on their behalf.
I think that it should be the responsibility of the department to call to the attention of anybody who adjudicates their situation at DHS cooperation that they have provided to the Justice Department in prosecuting cases and in disclosing this kind of thing. And I would be surprised if that were not taken into account.
I wrote a letter to the previous Attorney General, Ashcroft, asking for that consideration, even a communication to DHS indicating that, or even suggesting that they be treated in a way that would recognize their situation and not be treated as if we were part of that fraud.
It's our policy to call cooperation to the attention of any authority that deals with somebody who cooperates, whether it's DHS or Bar Association or anybody else. And I don't see why it should vary here. I will do what I can.
I would like to take on that. Thank you very much.